Hi, we're at one of our training facilities, and recently we did a presentation on using a car as cover. And that led to quite a few questions about the bullet resistance of automotive glass, specifically windshields. I have to point out that the side and rear windows of a car are not constructed the same as the windshield is. The side and rear windows are made of safety glass that's designed so that if it's broken, it'll shatter into thousands of little pieces. Like that. Now, these pieces are sharp and they can cut you. However, they're small enough that they're not going to make a deep or life-threatening wound. And that has saved a lot of people in car accidents. It's also allowed rescue workers to break a window out and pull people out of the car when they need to. Now, by contrast, a windshield is made of 2 layers of glass sandwiched over polymer. If you had a windshield that was made of the same safety glass that the side windows are, then when you're driving down the highway and a rock kicks up and hits your windshield, it might shatter the whole thing. The sandwich configuration makes the windshield easy enough to crack if it's hit by a big rock, but very resistant to breaking. Also, to make a car more aerodynamic, the windshield is slanted to varying degrees depending on what type of car. And it seems that there's a lot of people that think that slanted configuration, along with the sandwich construction, makes a windshield bullet resistant. Obviously, if I shot it with something like a 7.62 NATO, it would go right through. But there's people who think that against moderately powered handguns, a windshield will stop a bullet. Well, let's shoot a couple of windshields with a couple of different types of handguns and put that hypothesis to the test. Now, we want to see not only if the bullet will go through the windshield, but how much power it has left after it does. So what I'm going to do is stand 10 yards in front of the car, shoot through the windshield at the meat target. Now, for those who haven't seen it, it's leather jacket skin, followed by pork chop pectorals, pork ribs, a bag of oranges to simulate lung tissue, more pork ribs on the back, some of the leather jacket's lining to act as clothing on the front, and then the whole thing is backed up by a high-tech fleece bullet stop. Now, I want to start out with something low-powered, so I'm going to use my Baby Browning caliber 25 ACP, and I've got it loaded with Hornady custom ammunition, 35 grain jacketed hollow point. Let's see how it does. I shot 6 shots and I tried to spread them out, and one of them hit the windshield wiper, but of the 5 that hit the windshield, all were deflected, none went through. So the concept that a windshield has bullet-resistant properties has at least some validity to it. Let's try something else. Now I've moved the meat target over to the passenger side, and again I'll shoot from 10 yards. And this time I'll use my Smith & Wesson Model 36 1 7/8 inch barrel, and I've got it loaded with Remington green and white box 38 special non-plus P 158 grain round nose lead projectile. I fired 5 shots and only 3 went through. And that reminds me of a movie where someone asks Clint Eastwood why he carries a .44 Magnum, and he says, in part, quote, "357's a good weapon, but I've seen .38s careen off windshields." Well, now you've seen it too. And of the 3 rounds that went through, 2 hit the meat target, and both projectiles were stopped by the pork chop pectoral. They had almost no power left. We do have to take into consideration that I'm shooting from 10 yards, which some people would consider excessive, and I'm using non-plus P ammunition, and I was shooting from a kneeling position to maximize this windshield angulation in the windshield's favor. So let's account for some of those things and try this again. We've moved to a different car, and again I've got the meat target on the passenger side. But this Toyota Corolla does not have as much angulation to the windshield as the Dodge Neon we were shooting a minute ago. Also, I'm going to shoot from 7 yards, not 10. I'm going to shoot from a standing position, not kneeling, to take away some of the advantage of that angulation. And now I've got my Model 36 loaded with Remington green and white box 38 special plus P 125 grain semi-jacketed hollow point. Let's see if those things make a difference.
I fired 5 shots and all 5 went through the windshield. Because of the angulation from which I was firing, I had to shoot a little lower than I really wanted to, so 2 of those rounds went into the dash and were stopped. But the other 3 all went through, 2 hit the meat target, and there were bullets or fragments of bullets in the orange lung tissue. So the effectiveness of those rounds was greatly reduced by having to go through this windshield, but we do see a definite step up in effectiveness going from our non-plus P 158 grain round nose lead to our plus P 125 grain jacketed hollow points. Let's try something else. Now we put together a new meat target, and I have it on a taller booster seat so I can shoot through a higher part of the windshield. And I'll do that with my Beretta Model 92FS caliber 9x19, and I have it loaded with Winchester White Box 115 grain jacketed hollow point. And again, I'll shoot from 7 yards. So how'd we do? I fired 4 shots and all 4 went through, 3 of which hit the meat target. I took the meat target apart and recovered some bullet fragments and some badly mangled bullets. I also saw that the damage to the meat target was significantly less than what I typically see from 9x19 115 grain jacketed hollow points. So it would appear that our windshield did help us out a little, but not nearly enough. All of those fragments and bullets were recovered from the ribs on the back of the target. So what does all of this tell us? Well, first, when Clint Eastwood says that line about 38s careening off windshields, you can't call BS on that. Secondly, it would appear that a typical windshield does have some bullet-resistant properties. But as the results of the 9x19 show us, you don't have to get very far up the firearms food chain before the bullet-resistant properties of a windshield become irrelevant. Now I've got a new meat target put together, and it's on the driver's side. And this time I'll shoot it with my Ruger Security 6 357 Magnum with a 4-inch barrel. And I've got it loaded with Remington Green and White Box 357 Magnum 125 grain semi-jacketed hollow point. Let's see how this does from 7 yards. So it looks like Clint Eastwood was right. 357 is pretty good. 3 rounds went through the windshield, 2 of them hit the meat target, both achieved 100% penetration, and they were stopped by the fleece bullet stop behind the meat target. Let me show you a close-up of the projectiles. Here's our 2 projectiles, and both lost their jacket, and they're pretty mangled, but for the most part they held together and, as I said before, achieved 100% penetration. Well, I think we've proven our point about the bullet-resistant properties of windshields, but now I have to shoot a .44 Magnum. So I've got my Model 29 with a 6-inch barrel, and I have it loaded with Federal American Eagle .44 Magnum 240 grain jacketed hollow point. Let's see how this does from 7 yards. Now, I fired 6 shots with the .44 Magnum, and you may recall with a couple of the .38 rounds, they went low and through the dash and they were stopped by the dash. Well, I tried to recreate that, but in this case, I hit the windshield wiper and disabled it. But still, the dash did not stop those projectiles. They came right out through the speedometer, and some of those projectile fragments and secondary fragments hit the cooler and damaged it. Now, the reason I've got this cooler sitting here is so that the meat target can be on top of it and elevate it up to where you'd be if you were driving the car. And yes, some of the projectiles went through the meat target, and we'll take it apart in just a minute. But an interesting thing here is, as where the 357 was stopped by the first layer of fleece, the .44 Magnum rounds went clear through the fleece bullet stop and through the headrest, and they were finally stopped by the back seat. So we see the .44 Magnum, partially because it has a much heavier projectile, has a lot more penetration than the 357. Now let's take the meat target apart and see what kind of damage it did to that. So we see some holes in our pork chop pectorals and some pretty good damage to our orange lung tissue. But remember, the .44, just like all the other rounds, is robbed of quite a bit of its power by going through the windshield, but not so much that it prevented it from still having a lot of penetration. So what can we really take away from all of this? Well, first I'd say don't go out to a junked car and pull the windshield and cut it to shape and start using it as a ballistic vest. It probably won't be sufficient. And of course, as always, don't try this at home on what you call a professional, and thanks for watching the Bullets vs. Windshields video.